right, we are back. This is going to be a little scale, and it's not in our book, so please play along. It's going to have 10 items on it, so just number your paper 1 to 10, and your answers are going to be either true or false. So you're going to need to say if it's true or at least partly true, mostly true, give it a true. If it's false or mostly false, give it an F. Please give every one of them an answer. Don't like hem and haw and say to yourself, well, I really don't think it's either. I just really want a neutral. That just makes the scale not interpretable. So nobody can see your score. Go ahead and play along and either say true or false. So even if you're uncertain, answer all the questions. All right, so number 1, I often do things on impulse. True or false? 2, I would like to take off on a trip with no pre-planned or definite routes or timetables. I enjoy getting into new situations where you can't predict how things will turn out. 4, I sometimes like to do things that are a little frightening. 5, I'll try anything once. If you need to review these, go ahead and pause me. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to number 6. I would like the kind of life where one is on the move and traveling a lot with lots of change and excitement. 7, I sometimes do crazy things just for fun. You get to decide what's crazy. 8, I prefer friends who are excitingly unpredictable. 9, I often get carried away by new and exciting things and ideas that I never think of possible complications. 10, I like wild, uninhibited parties. All right, you can pause it if you need to review. Otherwise, I will move on to the scoring. All right, so what you just took is what's called a sensation-seeking scale. You're going to count up how many times you said true, and here's how you're going to score it. Finally, a scale that actually tells you what the range of numbers actually means. So if you have a 0, if you have no trues or 1 or 2 trues, that's called low in sensation seeking. 3 to 7 is considered moderate, and 8 to 10 is considered high in sensation seeking. So, whoops, clicked on the wrong thing. Ta-da! And I said so. Perfect. High scores on this scale, so people who are not just 8, 9, 10, but maybe a little bit, 7 you might consider yourself in the same category. They tend to prefer high stress careers like firefighter, police officer, or air traffic controller or something like that. They're more likely to engage in smoking. They're more likely to at least experiment with drug use. I'm not saying necessarily become addicted to drugs, but are more likely to engage in drug use. Having a higher score on this is beneficial for being able to focus while under stress. So it kind of makes a lot of sense that a person who's high in sensation seeking might pick a high stress career because they're better able to focus under stress than other people are. It's also beneficial if you need to be fearless. I mean, there are times and there are certain circumstances where fearlessness is a big, important quality. And so fearlessness, being able to make quick decisions. It may interfere with thinking, though. People who are high on sensation seeking may not really think things through. That's what allows them to be fearless. It's what enables them to make quick decisions. When they're under stress, they focus on the parts of the problem that they're focusing on, and they maybe don't notice all the other things that need to be taken into consideration. It's funny because I am like a 2 on the sensation seeking scale, and my husband is like a 10. So he's always been in high stress careers. He was a rescue swimmer in the Coast Guard. Now he's a volunteer firefighter. That's sort of his, late in life sort of thing he's been doing. I'm not big on having a stressful career. I'm not big on needing to be fearless. And whenever I express concern about, for example, when you're flying and the pilot's going to be like, let's hope he's in a good mood and whatever. My husband always points out that like when he was a rescue swimmer, he's like, You just sat in the back, strapped in, and had to hope that everything was going to be fine. You couldn't think about it. You just went. He jumped out of helicopters. He's like, you just went. You have to make quick decisions, right? The helicopter's at a particular position, the deck of the boat's at a particular, you got to jump. When it's the right, you have to decide. You can't sit there and think, should I go? Should I go? Because now it's too late. It rolled again, and now you got to wait till the next rise in the tide or whatever. He's perfectly suited for that. Now, I have to say, the biggest disagreements we ever get into in our lifetime is the times he's not really thinking about things that maybe he should have thought through. It makes a lot of sense, right? Because to me, the thinking it through makes, like, of course you're going to think before you act, but it is contraindicated with a person who's higher in sensation seeking to think before they act, especially in situations where they don't perceive a lot of risk. They were like, oh, there's nothing to think about here. Nothing bad's going to happen. In a scary situation, they might have like one moment of thinking, make sure they've got all their equipment set up, and then they go. They just go. So a person who's higher in this may have a different way of thinking and have different effects from stress than a person who's lower in sensation seeking. That's the important thing that I want you to take away. Now, there are different types of sensation seeking. There's thrill and adventure seeking, right? Some people like to do things like parachute jumping, race car driving, right? These are risky behaviors, but they're socially acceptable. Like, it's okay to be a parachute jumper. It's okay to be a race car driver. There are experience seekers who they have a drive to do sort of like nonconformist things. They like to expand their mind through experiences. They like to use all of their senses in their experiences. So they may have unusual friends. They may like to travel a lot. They may be very artistic. There's another section of sensation seeking called disinhibition. And this is, people who like to do things that will help them to not feel any inhibition. So they like to socially drink. They like to party. They like to do stuff. A lot of times people who are high on the disinhibition component really like to have other people involved in the sensation seeking. Boredom susceptibility. This is a low tolerance for repetitive experiences. They tend to get restless when they don't have external stimulation. I have to say my husband's really high on that one. He definitely cannot even be bored. So he just wanders around if he's bored. I read a book. So different kind of thing. I would like to argue reading a book is experience seeking. I would like to point that out. It is not the opposite of sensation seeking to say, I would like to read a book. If that sounded defensive, I apologize. It's completely defensive. But true also. So there are some personality factors that will help to determine whether a person sees something as a challenge or a threat. There's also some environmental factors that will help to determine whether a person sees something as a challenge or a threat. If a person has good social support, they tend to be more resilient. That means they're more likely to label something as a challenge. They probably know that even if they were to fail, they've got their social support and everything will be okay. Or they know that they will be supported through their efforts as they're attempting to complete the task. And so I think I can because I know I have a village behind me supporting me. So there's different kinds of social support, right? There's your family support, good quality support, stable schools. That's another source of social support. I mean, some of us were, as little kids, raised in families that didn't have a lot of family support, but maybe we had a really good teacher who looked out after us and set us on the right trajectory to find the right people at the next grade level and so on. That can really go a long way in compensating for maybe a lack in the family or maybe a lack in the neighborhood. But if you lucked out and you had all three of these things, where you had good family support, you came from a neighborhood that had good safety, you had good stable schools with teachers who were invested and peers who you could have like consistently with you through the years and stuff like that, that really contributes to much greater resilience. If you were lacking any of these, then it's going to contribute to more difficulty. All right. Now, here's a little scale I wanted to share with you that kind of gets at the issue of emotional facilitation of thought. So on each of these questions, you're going to use the same scale. And I'm sorry, I tried to make this look a little neater, but it doesn't look great. So just enjoy. 1 means not at all. 5 means very much or very often, and you do have a true neutral in the number 3. So you can pick any number you want. I just labeled the polar ends. So number 1. There's a total of 4 questions, so this won't take very long. Number 1. How often do you personally use the word we to refer to each of the following groups? So 1A is people in your community. So 1A, go ahead and rate how often you use the word we when referring to people in your community. B would be Americans. So this would be people in your country. C would be all people everywhere. How often do you use the word we when referring to all people everywhere? Okay, you can pause me if you need to reflect on that one. Number 2, you have the same set of people to think about, but now you have how much do you identify with, feel a part of, feel love toward, have concern for each of the following groups. So kind of try to think of those 3 things in the parentheses as like one concept. How much do you identify with each of the following groups? And go ahead and rate the people in your community, Americans, and all humans everywhere. Number 3, same setup, but now it's how much would you say you care? In parentheses, it says feel upset, want to help when bad things happen to each of the following groups. So again, care is being defined as feeling upset and wanting to help when bad things happen to, and go ahead and rate people in your community, Americans, and all humans everywhere. And our final question, to what degree do you think of the following groups of people as family to you? People in your community, Americans, all humans everywhere. All right, so those were the 4 questions. You can pause me if you need, as needed. All right. So this is what's called the Identification with All Humanity scale. And to score it, you can tally up your total points for each of the categories. So you would tally up for questions 1, 2, 3, and 4, your ratings that you gave for A, your ratings for B, and your ratings for C. And then you're going to divide each of those totals by 4 so you can get your average. So we want to see what your average score was for your community, Americans, and all humans everywhere. So you're going to get 4 average scores, 1 for each question. So how you scored on C is really the crux of this scale. It's getting at your identification with all humanity. The average respondent score is 3, which is the neutral point. The researchers called it somewhat, but it's the neutral point. So the average respondent rated the 4 items when thinking of all humanity as a 3. Fewer than 10% of people tested scored that as a 4 or higher, right? Leaning towards, 4 or 5. The average identification with all humanity score is half a point lower than the average score for community and the average score for nation. I put Americans in for us because we're in the US. If you're in another country, they would insert that country's name. So research establishes that identification with all humanity is more than just an absence of prejudice and its sources. So if you think, well, I'm a low prejudice person, so I should have given higher scores, it's unrelated to, well, it's not determined by prejudice. So if you are in the majority of people who gave it a 3 or lower, your average score is 3 or lower for that category of people, that doesn't mean you're prejudiced. That just means, it means something else. It's more than the sum of positive qualities. So it's not that, dispositional empathy determines how you feel about all humanity. It's not a function of principled moral reasoning, how you feel about all humanity. Interestingly enough, I've had respondents who have marked community and all humanity higher than they marked Americans. And I always think that's funny because the people in your community probably, as long as you're, here in America, in the U.S., the people in your community are Americans, and all humanity includes Americans. So it's kind of funny. It feels like a purposeful dig at like a national identification. And so that's kind of an interesting, for me, that's a really interesting, I'm a cognitive psychologist. And so for me, that's an interesting sort of blinder that people might have, that they think, I'll say, I don't feel as close to Americans, but I feel close to my community. I feel close to all humans. I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, the thing that's important about this scale that you just took is really that, when we empathize, we think more clearly, right? When we have an ability to sort of put ourselves in somebody else's position, we tend to do a better job of thinking and making good decisions. And, empathy and compassion may affect our attitudes towards some groups more than it affects our attitudes towards others. Like I said, some of my respondents have shown great compassion for two of the groups and not for the other group. And there's something probably attitudinal that's going on there, right? And so when we take a scale like that, it gives us a little bit of insight into sort of how we establish the in-group and the out-group, or the us versus them, or the, us versus others kind of attitudes that we carry around with us just implicitly. We don't mean to, but it is just sort of what we carry around with us. All right, I'm going to stop here, and in the next video, we will come back and talk about emotional understanding.